What's shaking bacons? It's happened again. I wholeheartedly disagree with the critic reviews for a movie. And the audience reviews for a movie, actually. Let's talk about Annihilation. Came out February 23rd, allegedly based on the novel by Jeff Vandermeer. I was very hesitant to see this movie because I have been a fan of the Southern Reach trilogy, which is the formal title for the trilogy, since they were published in 2014. I have told people about this series time and time again. I actually have 2 of the books on my desk with me because I'm going to write a full review for the movie, actually written out for STEEMIT, so I wanted to pull a couple relevant quotes. I own the trilogy. I have read it at least 3 times. I'm working on my 4th time rereading them. I reread this yesterday to prepare for the movie that I saw today. I am currently rereading Authority. I'm a big fan of these novels. I have never read anything quite like this trilogy. It is called the Southern Reach Trilogy. It's by Jeff Vandermeer. He's a very respected and well-recognized author. He's done compendiums of science fiction. He's got this series. There's another series he's been doing. It's currently in progress. I read the first novel. I wasn't as into that one as I was into this series, but this series alone made me a lifelong fan of Jeff Vandermeer. I have never read another book series that so made me feel unsettled, like the world was not what I thought it was. I have never read anything ever that was quite like this book series, in all honesty. I have never read anything that made me feel as though something was right behind me, watching me, and if I acknowledged that it was there, that it would destroy me. And it gave me such a profound sense of unease the entire time I was reading the series. And then you finally get to the end of the first book, which is where all of the scenario is laid out, and it's mind-blowing. It's a fantastic series. The second 2 books expand upon the universe a little more and tell you what happens. I'm not going to talk about spoilers. I will talk about spoilers later. I will cue you. So if you have not seen the movie yet, you haven't read the books, I'm not going to spoil anything for you. I'm a huge fan of this book series, and when there is any adaptation of a novel into a film, there's going to be a disconnect. I don't think I have ever seen anything 100% adapted into a film that managed to please me, with the exception of Lord of the Rings. But Lord of the Rings, I think everyone at this point knows, is like another level. This, I had extreme trepidation about, because this is such a unique perspective in these books. The first book is told from the viewpoint of the biologist. So, in brief, the story is about a biologist that joins a secret team that is going into a zone called Area X that the government claims is an ecological disaster zone that was actually created by an event that they don't fully understand. Every team that they have sent in either has not come back or has come back significantly damaged or changed. So this is the story of the biologist who goes into this zone to find out what happened to her husband who went into the zone before her. Most of the novel is told very deliberately from the viewpoint only of the biologist and what she can observe as this weird area starts to affect her mentally and physically. So as you read this book, you experience as she is experiencing what is happening, and it very heavily dwells on the mental and psychological side of what is happening in this crazy area. And I thought, they're going to try and make a movie out of this. It would be amazing if they were able to portray that correctly. So when I went into this movie, I thought, okay, as long as they can, I understand they're going to need to have some kind of visual representation of the psychological aspects of what happens. But as long as they can stay true to the premise of the story, which is truly astounding, it's going to be okay. And I think I could accept that, because this is a very difficult story and a very difficult premise to translate to the screen. I did not expect Alex Garland to completely throw away the entire plot. And I mean, he completely threw away the entire plot. Here's where I differ from the critics and from the audience. If I was someone who had not read the books and I knew nothing about this story, I probably would have rated it about the same as the audience and critics did. With that being said, this movie is based on a novel, and yet almost nothing in the movie related to the novel. And in fact, after we left the movie and my husband asked me, so how did it compare? I said, I don't know what we just watched, because that was not the plot of the book, like, at all. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I explained what the actual plot was, and he looked at me and he was like, that's not the movie we just saw. And I said, I know. That's why I am upset. If it was a standalone movie, I would be talking about this differently. But if you're going to make a movie and then say based on a novel, and then it is completely a different plot than the novel or the entire trilogy, then I'm going to rate the movie poorly. I did not like this movie. There is a host of reasons I didn't like it. The biggest one is the story of the movie in no way matches the actual story in the first novel, nor does it tie into the series as a whole. Part of this is because I read an article that Alex Garland read the book once, didn't bother rereading it, and then wrote his own version as though he had dreamed about the book, which is why it's so vaguely related to the actual story. The irony is that the actual novel is way better and more suspenseful and more tense, and has a much more satisfying ending that could have set them up for the full trilogy of movies to make profit on, than the story that Alex Garland put together out of his dream of what the book was about. And it's very unfortunate. There were so many issues and inconsistencies with it. Even as a standalone movie, if you want to pretend it was not based on a book, there were gaping holes and question marks that were not explained. And my husband was asking me questions about them, and I was like, well, I mean, I'd be happy to give you an answer, but none of that was in the book. None of this movie was in the book. The only thing that this film had in common with the novel is that there was an Area X, a biologist went into it after her husband had been in there, and that eventually she did go to a lighthouse and find the psychologist. Was it the same lighthouse that was in the movie? No. Was it the same biologist that was in the book as it was in the movie? No. Nothing against Natalie Portman. I love her. You guys know I love Padme Amidala. I think Natalie Portman's a great actress. The main character in this book series is actually of Asian descent. Oh yeah, Area X, for some reason, this movie called it The Shimmer, which makes it sound like a stupid fairy tale fantasy, some kind of BS aurora draping, which it's not. I'm incredibly disappointed by this movie, and if you have read the books, you're going to be disappointed. And there's no way around that. There's just not. As you can imagine, after everything I have said, I'm not a fan of this film. And in fact, if it were not for my objective movie scale that of course I made for myself that you guys know I use, I would have given it probably like a 20% maybe. As it is, my movie rating scale gave this a 39%. It was a 39% for me. 79% of Google users liked the movie. 8 out of 10 on IMDb. According to Rotten Tomatoes, 87% is the critic score. There's a 64% audience score. Mine is obviously far lower. What saved this movie, which gave it any kind of redemption for me, was that it had beautiful visuals, Natalie Portman did a great job acting. I think she carried the film. And the music at the end was haunting. And it's actually stuck in my head right now. That's like the best thing that I think they did was that end music to symbolize the creature that they encounter. I think it was fantastic. The filmography was spot on. That's what I mean when I talk about beautiful visuals. Alex Garland puts a very interesting emphasis on hands throughout the movie, even though he doesn't really ever do anything with it. It's an interesting filmographic choice, I suppose. Where the film suffers primarily is the story. It does not follow the novel's plot, and because it doesn't follow an already well-established plot, it is disjointed. There's a lot that is hinted at that's never expanded on. Plot threads that are not tied off, which could have potentially elevated the film. Acting was kind of stilted and awkward in places for some of the actors in the movie. Musical choices for a lot of the film seemed bizarre to me and not fitting. They almost seemed like they would be great for like a hipsterish movie where you go hiking through the forest. That's the kind of like jaunty tunes that they would play as they walk through the forest, and this kind of weird, attempting to sound nostalgic music that they chose for flashback scenes, which were very off. There were a lot of gaping holes that were not addressed in the movie that were problematic. And another big issue is that this film really fell victim to the trailer spoiling major suspenseful moments and events in the movie that would have largely contributed much more to creating a feeling of tension, making the movie a little more suspenseful. As it was, you went into it and you were able to clearly recognize every scene that it was set up in the trailer and where it was coming, which was basically a lot of the major moments in the movie, which was unfortunate. And another major issue, since they completely discarded the plot of the novel and they had a very final ending, they completely threw away the opportunity to expand on the universe or answer questions in the second and third novels, Acceptance and Authority. It's really sad because if Alex Garland had followed the plot of the book, like, he didn't need to rewrite the story. If he had followed the plot of the novel, the story would have been way more tense. It would have had more villains, more action, more creepy moments. It would have been so cool. And after I explained the plot to my husband, he was like, that's way cooler than what they did. That's scarier than what they did. Why did they not use the actual plot? It's already done for you. There would have been no thought involved, really. If they had actually followed the plot because it was so well done, the film wouldn't have felt as disjointed as it did. It wouldn't have been as full of questions as it was. It would have felt well-rounded. It would have had better character development. The environment would have had more explanation. The psychologist and the team members would have made more sense. The biologist herself would have made more sense. It would have been more satisfying and fulfilling, and it would have left the viewer wanting more, which would have meant that they could have made the second and third movies. And that's not only better for our entertainment value as an audience, but it would have been better, you know, for the pockets of Hollywood. And it's truly sad because in the end, Alex Garland's interpretation of Annihilation hinted at a lot and fulfilled nothing. And it's truly a shame. Even if it had been filmed differently, the story is told from the point of view of the biologist. Part of what made the novel so intense was that you couldn't see what was happening to the biologist. And there is something that happens to her. And if they had shot the movie, for example, if they had taken a risk and, say, shot the movie from the point of view of the biologist where you never actually see her, it would have taken it to a different level, man. And it would have made it so much better. And they just didn't do it. If you read the books and you liked the books, you're not going to like this movie. If you do, I would be very surprised. If you haven't read the books, the movie's okay. My husband hasn't read the books. Even before I explained the differences in the plot to him, however, he was like, yeah, this movie, it didn't make sense. There's like huge holes in the plot. They could have taken it different places that they didn't. The acting seemed funky from everyone but Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman essentially carried the movie. If you haven't read the books and you don't come at it with that kind of a mindset, it's not a great movie. From that viewpoint, it's okay. Again, what carries it? Visually beautiful. Natalie Portman's acting carried it through, and the end music was really very unique and sensational. I'd like to talk about spoilers, and I'm going to delve a little more in plot differences between the book and the movie. So obviously, if you have not either read the book, if you have not seen the movie, you best scooch, because I'm going to talk about spoilers, so you better scooch along. The plot, I've already mentioned, does not match. In the novel, and I will try to be as brief as possible, the central plot revolves around the discovery of the biologist team, an unmapped and unmarked structure in Area X. The story is told in the form of a field journal that the biologist has left for you as the reader to read. All of the team members of every expedition that goes to Area X is expected to keep a field journal and turn it in at the end of their mission. Granted, almost no one returns, but that's the directive that they're given. In the book, the biologist joins the team because her husband has died. He, or something that looked like him, came back from his mission out of the blue. No one knew how he got back. He didn't know how he got back, and he acted so oddly that she realized he was not actually her husband. He had left her an emergency phone number to call if anything ever happened or went wrong related to his mission. So she calls it, Southern Reach comes and gets him. It turns out his entire team had come back. All of them had the same thing. None of them were actually the team members. And they all had extremely malignant forms of cancer and died very quickly. So the biologist essentially has nothing to live for. She never cheated on him. She's not a professor. She's not ex-military. She decides she really has nothing going for her. She wants to find out what happened. So she joins the Southern Reach, which is the government entity that oversees this mysterious Area X, and requests to join one of their missions. She gets interviewed and she's accepted. So then she goes through, along with her other team members, a very long period of training in survival skills and weapon skills and all this kind of thing in order to prepare them for what they may face. They also get taught to be psychologically profiled and put psychologically into hypnotic trances, because the barrier is almost invisible in the novel. And the only way you can see the entrance is it's like a small golden door, and they call it the crossing. It's not a rainbow, aurora, stupidly named shimmer type of event. It's almost invisible and hard to see. So the crossing apparently has driven people insane who haven't had their minds guarded from it. All of them are told, we have to get you ready to be hypnotically tranced to cross over. They make the crossing. There's only 4 of them that go, including the biologist. It's the psychologist, who's the team lead, the biologist, an anthropologist, and a surveyor who was ex-military. They make the crossing and they are woken up by the psychologist 3 to 4 days later, which they hinted at in the movie, never explained, never touched on again. Psychologist never says a word about it, which would have made more sense if they actually explained what happened, which is they were hypnotically induced to make it through the passageway. They wake up, they make their way to the base camp. They mention that it's just a pristine wilderness. They don't really see anything weird per se. They hear moaning from an animal that they think may be malignant, that is hiding in the swamp, that sounds like human moaning. The movie apparently interpreted this as a dual creature cross between an alligator with shark-like teeth and a bear that speaks with the voice of a dead comrade that attacks them. That doesn't happen in the novel. The novel, I think, is more insidious because it pits them against each other. They find this structure shortly after they arrive at their base camp, and this is the structure in which the entire plot of the novel revolves around. This is completely ignored in the movie. It is not alluded to. It is not shown. The most that happens is that Alex Garland attempts to blend the lighthouse with the tower, but they're completely different. And it's funny because depending on the person in the novel, this structure is either seen as a tower or as a tunnel. And the biologist places an extremely strong emphasis that this is a submerged tower. And then Not only is this completely central to the plot point and the story location completely ignored, but Alex Garland then makes it a hole-like tunnel in the lighthouse. So not only does he ignore the plot, but he ignores the fact that they're insistent it's a tower, not a tunnel. He ignores the plot and he makes it a tunnel. What? Dude, what? So they go into this tower because they're like, what the heck is this? This isn't on the map. None of us knew this was here. And they find that something is making writing of religious, like weird, infectious in the head passages on the walls of this tower as it circles down into the ground. The writing is made up of living organisms that appear to be fungi or plants with little hand-shaped creatures crawling amongst it. The biologist gets too close, accidentally inhales some of the spores, and gets infected with it. The infection ends up rendering her immune to hypnotic trances because it starts changing her entire nervous system. She then finds out, as they leave the tower, as the psychologist attempts to control them all with hypnotic suggestion, which is what has been happening the entire time, that the psychologist is in fact controlling all of them. The biologist pretends to go along. She doesn't want to be caught. She wants to find out what's going on. They wake up the next morning. One of their members has completely vanished. The psychologist assures them that she has gone back to await extraction. She got freaked out. The psychologist sends the biologist and the surveyor, who are the other two that are left, into the tower and says, I'm going to stay here. They go into the tower. The biologist realizes that the tower is actually a living creature, and they can hear its heartbeat. They can see its breathing. The surveyor has been hypnotized, can't see it at first. There's stuff everywhere that they think is from the crawler, which is what they're calling the thing that's writing with plants on the walls. As they try and seek the crawler and find out what the actual writing says, because they think it's alien writing, they want to make a record of it and study it, they find the body of their other team member, the anthropologist. And they discover, based on boot prints and markings, that the psychologist hypnotically sent the anthropologist to her death, confronting the crawler. And the crawler murders the heck out of the anthropologist. So they find the anthropologist just completely murdered. Both of them realize it's the psychologist. The psychologist is one of the villains in the story. They go up to confront her. The psychologist is just gone. She's taken off with their stuff. She's headed for the lighthouse. She's left some supplies. That's it. Biologist wants to go after her. The surveyor says, screw that. She's gone nuts. She killed the anthropologist. We need to get out of here. We need to go back to the border and await extraction. The biologist says, I want to find out what's going on. I want answers. Give me 1 day to go talk to her. So the surveyor agrees, says, I'll watch over base camp. Biologist goes off to find the psychologist. I'm going to try and condense this as much as possible. Biologist gets to the lighthouse, finds a war zone. Like, there's bullet holes. There was obviously some kind of battle. There's blood everywhere. The lighthouse was clearly inhabited. She goes up to the top, finds the psychologist stuff, no sign of the psychologist, and then she discovers hundreds of journals, of field journals from previous missions. And she finds out that not only was the psychologist lying to them and hypnotically controlling them, that Southern Reach knew about the Area X tower structure, where people have just been sent repeatedly into Area X and no one comes out. And somehow all of the field journals end up in the lighthouse every single time. So she reads these journals and she finds out that she says there's unspeakable horrors she doesn't want to repeat. And my guess is the movie's reference to that is the moving guts scene where her husband cuts that dude open and his guts are writhing like snakes, because that's kind of an unspeakable horror. But again, that's not in the book. And she finds her husband's journal in the book. She found out that they found the tower, they found the lighthouse. Parts of their team started dying. Some of them killed each other. They found others that claimed that something attacked them and killed everyone else. The husband and the last surviving team member return to the tower and see clones of their entire team entering the tower and going down to the crawler. And then they never come out. So the implication is that there is another passageway out of the tower back to the real world. and that the only entrance is not at the border where they crossed over, which is what the government thinks. The person who came back to her in the beginning truly was not her husband. It was a clone. At this point, of course, the biologist freaks out. She decides that she's going to head back to the tower, rendezvous with the surveyors, see if they can get out of there and find out once and for all maybe what the tower is. She starts to leave and discovers that the psychologist had tried to kill herself. She jumped off the lighthouse. She finds her on the ground, tries to get information out of her. The psychologist is essentially like, screw you, I didn't like you anyway. And when she first finds the psychologist starts screaming the word annihilation. She screams it in the movie too, for kind of a weird reason. And you're sitting there in the movie like, why is this woman yelling annihilation? You find out after the psychologist dies from her wounds from jumping off of the top of the lighthouse. The biologist takes her journal and discovers that the psychologist had been wounded by the crawler when she had gone down there with the anthropologist. So she takes her journal and discovers annihilation is a trigger word that they have been hypnotically trained to instantly kill themselves with. So the psychologist, despite having just tried to kill herself, attempts to kill the biologist. So the psychologist is truly like a very villainous character, completely subverted all of the team members, lied about why they were going in, lied about the tower, killed the anthropologist, and tried to kill the biologist. So that was a huge missed opportunity. The movie just had the psychologist kind of cold, and if they were ever in peril, she just kind of stood there and watched without really any emotion on her face. She didn't seem to care what was going on, and she dies at the end. She just kind of vomits up this alien creature inside the lighthouse after yelling annihilation, because she says, oh, they're gonna kill the world and everything, annihilation, and that's it. And it's like, what? It's always so much creepier if you have like a psychological villain like that who's been screwing with your head. Look at Shutter Island. Look at Inception. That shit's great. It's awesome. It's way better than getting attacked by a weird bear that has a human voice. And then alluding to the fact that the psychologist is somehow complicit and then never touching on it and screwing up the ending. So that was something that really was messed up. The words from the tower are pervasive throughout this novel. They're also pervasive throughout the second and third novels in the trilogy. You never see words anywhere in this. You know, the whole movie, I was waiting for the tower. I was like, is it time for the tower? Oh my God, they're going to show the tower next. The tower is going to be so amazing. I can't wait to see what they do with the crawler in the tower. Wait, oh, the movie's almost over. Where, are they not going to show the tower? Why is there a hole in the lighthouse? The entire plot revolves around the tower. I don't want to completely ruin it if you want to read the book at this point, or if you haven't, but very quickly, biologist tries to return to the tower. She is attacked by the thing in the swamp that moans, manages to escape after discovering it's got a human face, and that gives her the hint that all of the animals they've encountered are actually people from former expeditions that were mutated by Area X. Surveyor goes crazy, tries to kill her, and then she goes into the tower and confronts the crawler. And that's where I will not tell you any more. Needless to say, she does not leave Area X. She does not kill the crawler. Area X does not go away. Area X continues and expands. The movie was just way off. I mean, they got the background of the biologist wrong. It's not called a shimmer. She wasn't having an affair on her husband. The main character was Asian. This woman was not. I mean, again, nothing against Natalie Portman. You guys know I love her, but really, come on, like try and be true to the book, right? They never expanded on questions that were raised about the psychologist's weird behavior in the movie. There was a weird focus in the movie on bruises for some reason that went absolutely nowhere. They showed the disturbing scene of the writhing guts and the person that he had turned into, that the guy who cut open had turned into. That really wasn't explained. No one else talked about it. There was no further discoveries. There was one reference to Gina Rodriguez's character was like, oh, my fingerprints are moving, I'm crazy. The bear thing that killed Shepard in the beginning comes back and then appears to kill Gina Rodriguez's character and doesn't. And Gina Rodriguez isn't dead and tries to shoot it and distract it. And there's like a vague nod at the end with the plot-centric tower with that stupid tunnel hole that looks nothing like the way the tunnel's described in the book. The creature looks nothing the way it's described in the book. There was that weird quasi-mirroring scene after it sucks out Natalie Portman's blood. It doesn't enter her like it entered the psychologist, but it sucks a drop of her blood and creates a weird rainbow blackish humanoid figure of itself that sort of mirrors her but doesn't, because it goes toward her instead of away from her. And then it just kind of mushes her on the door. And I thought, well, is it absorbing her? Is it killing her? Is it going to clone her? Is this how they get cloned? No. It just mushes her for some reason. And it barely caught fire at first when she tries to kill it. Its hands are burning and it slowly takes the time to like pet the wall of the lighthouse, and it sets everything on fire, and then it goes up in flames. And then they completely end it with the thing dying. And there's a vague hint at the end where she embraces her not husband and their eyes kind of gleam, and it's like, oh, maybe the thing left host. But it really completely closed off any entry toward the second or third novel. Not that it's related to the first one at all. It should have been called The Shimmer, a film based on concepts created by Jeff Vandermeer. Because to call this movie Annihilation, when it doesn't share the same plot, it just shares a couple ideas, is inaccurate. It was disappointing. And on top of the story being disappointing, guys, and bear in mind, I'm only talking about the story right now. So the story, completely inconsistent and disappointing. A lot of the acting was stilted and odd. Natalie Portman truly did carry the film. It was pretty predictable after the trailer. You cringed a little bit with some of the, like, I cringed when I saw that they had to work an affair in there for some reason. Again, she doesn't have an affair in the book. She and her husband just gets discontent with his job and with their marriage, and he goes off on this mission. There was no affair. You know, she didn't leave him. She didn't cheat on him. So I cringed at the affair. I was like, why do they need to put this in here? Is it just because they feel like they got to have a little bit of sex in this movie? Does everything need that these days? I mean, I don't know why it was added. The entertainment factor, because there were so many holes in the film and because it was so far off from the actual plot of the book that it was ostensibly based on, I just wanted it to end. And the music, except for the ending, as I have mentioned, was out of sync. It sounded like a really peppy, upbeat hiking movie. It actually reminded me of the song in Ice Age, the do 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 do. It was that kind of a music until the end. And I was like, and then moments where you would think there would be more tense music, there was nothing. You didn't feel tense at all. It was very disappointing. It failed as a standalone horror movie. It failed as a standalone thriller. It failed as something purporting itself to be based on the novel. I did not like Annihilation. 39% for me on my movie scale. What did you guys think about it? Did you like it? Did you enjoy this movie? Have you read the books? Would you be interested in reading the books? I swear that they are so much more suspenseful and interesting than the movie itself. Highly recommend them. Jeff Vandermeer is fantastic in this series as an author. You really see his skill, and it's so eerie. I would recommend, if you're going to either take the time to read the book or see the movie. The book is not that long. You know, you can tell it's not super thick. It's 195 pages. And it's seriously a page turner the whole time. So if you're going to take the time to either watch the movie or read the book, 100% read the book. Don't see the movie unless you are very curious or unless you have no desire to read the book. If you have no desire to read the book, you'll probably find the movie okay. Let me know what you guys think about it. I hope you're all having an awesome, awesome week, and I'll catch you later. See ya.